The basic mission of our lab is to build really easy to use tools that help improve the scale and quality of citizen engagement, stakeholder engagement in marine spatial planning around the world. We first got involved in this work through the Marine Life Protection Act initiative in California. As Ben mentioned, early on it was kind of more of an expert-driven, more of a kind of top-down approach to the planning efforts, and our lab was funded to build a tool called Marine Map, which enabled more of a bottom-up, stakeholder-driven approach where stakeholders could directly draw where they thought marine protected areas should go, and then get feedback on the consequences of their proposal. One of the great strengths of this is because all the stakeholders, whether they were a commercial fisherman or an environmental advocate or any of the others, because they were all using the same science and data and analytics, it enabled real kind of apples to apples comparison in these kind of negotiation and horse trading that takes place in the planning process. It got an award from the U.S. Institute for Environmental Conflict Resolution, and I was actually on the facilitation team and saw this, and that's how I got plugged into and pulled into the work of the lab. Marine Map represented several iterations of trying to refine this concept. It's often called geodesign in the planning field, of kind of sketching, analysis. I go back and I revise my sketch, I do a new analysis, and that kind of iterative workflow. The software platform to enable that went through its similar iteration, and last October we released a new version of the platform, which we called C-Sketch, a new name. We really built it from the ground up to rather than a custom application for California or Oregon or specific places, we redesigned it as a global software as a service, so you can quickly spin up a project for a particular geography and get rolling pretty quickly on stakeholder engagement and marine spatial planning around the world. So what I'll show you is a quick little demo video, and good. Sometimes with videos and PowerPoints it gets weird, but I think it's gonna work. Okay, sweet. Okay, so this is our current release of C-Sketch, and this is just a demo project that we developed using data from the sanctuaries. It's looking at ship traffic and blue whale populations and the resulting whale strikes that happen in the channel. So the scenario here is Will's logged in, and he's posting a message in the discussion forum. Look at this problem. We've got a lot of ship traffic going where blue whales are congregating. Perhaps we should redesign the shipping channel to move it away from where where we got most of the observations of blue whales. Todd Bryan is one of the other developers. He'll log in here and see that comment. So what we're trying to enable here is this kind of collaborative planning workflow for multiple users, either in the same location or spread out around the world, could collaborate together and kind of co-create a better management plan to address particular problems. So Will's going to turn on the existing shipping lane here so you can see basically what the current design is. And then using these sketching tools, he'll draw a new shipping lane over the existing one. And like in Marine Map, you can just click right on the map to be able to sketch out a new idea. And then you could actually change the number of lanes or change the separation distance. This is a super simple report and design just for demonstration purposes. And you save that, and then you can run a report to see, okay, based on that new shipping lane design, what could be the potential consequences of that. Well, it looks like it reduces blue whale impacts, but increases dramatically the likelihood of gray whale strikes. It also increased fuel costs for the shipping industry because it's a little bit more of a circuitous route that they would have to go through. But Will's able to post that initial idea to the forum and just use it as part of the conversation. Say, well, here's a cut. What do you think? And maybe you could do something that would be better. So Todd's going to take that design, edit it back on his machine in another location, and then post a different alternative idea back to the forum. So looks like Todd is pointing out an issue where Will's design overlapped some oil rigs, and clicking on that little map bookmark, it turns on where those oil rigs were that Todd saw, and Todd was able to draw on the map where that problem spot was. And so Will says, well, thanks for pointing that out. Do you have any better ideas there, Hotshot? And so Todd is going to post up an alternative design which avoids those oil rigs, which is probably a good idea. And then haven't seen this video very often, so the timing is I'm a little off on the time. So then what it allows is, I create an idea, I share it with you, you can go and edit it, and then it immediately changes the resulting consequences of the design. And then Will is able to then take Todd's new design, see it on the map, but also compare the analysis for these two ideas side by side. So Todd was able to reduce whale strikes pretty much across the board, had less of an impact on fuel costs, but also looked like was impacting some sensitive habitats, and crucially avoided running into an oil rig, which is probably a good idea. So this is the essential workflow that we're working to enable in C-Sketch. We're building in a lot of new functionality this year in support of marine spatial planning in New Zealand primarily, and also some work we're doing with the UN Environmental Program. So one thing we're adding in here is actually turning C-Sketch into a survey collection tool, so map-based survey. So if you've ever used SurveyMonkey, it's kind of SurveyMonkey meets a map. So if you all are working to engage stakeholders in data collection, you'd be able to use C-Sketch to actually get data collected through the same platform that then later on you might use for planning. More relevant to the topic at hand, we've played around with the ideas of looking at cumulative impacts and also multiple objective planning, and have, let me back up real quick. And this was an earlier, using actually the Marine Map interface, an earlier attempt at what kind of an interface could we create to enable an average person to begin to work with these cumulative impacts data sets and make them relevant for a planning process. So in this implementation, the user is able to draw a marine protected area, and then within that marine protected area, get a report on, so they give it a name, they designate what level of protection for that MPA they're going to have. This is a super simple prototype kind of implementation of this idea. The report they get back, then they're able to see, of course, the size of the MPA, some of the cumulative impacts of various types by a data table and also bar chart. But then they're able to go in with each of these human activities, and they could actually manipulate those stressors and see how the cumulative impact score within that MPA changes. So they begin to understand kind of the sensitivities and relevance, and they might think, I'm much more concerned about X versus Y. Let me change those stressors and see what the resulting cumulative impact looks like. From a planning perspective, it's probably quite too complicated for most people to get their head around, but it's a first shot, and I think we've got an opportunity with some folks in the Great Lakes that are doing restoration work in the Great Lakes, and they want to use this kind of a cumulative impacts approach there. So that may be one of our first kind of real-world planning scenarios where we try to figure out what the interface looks like and in what ways do people need to work with those cumulative impacts data to make it more relevant for planning. So that was an early attempt. The earlier work that was described around trade-off analytics, we're really excited about, and we've been having lots of conversations with Crow White and have been really trying to get this funded in a number of the different planning processes we're working in, because we think it could be incredibly powerful within the C-Sketch interface. So the basic idea, and I'll blow that right-hand panel up, is on the top, the user would draw, where they would site a wind farm and where they would site some protected areas. The user-generated idea would get plotted out in comparison with some optimization runs, either from a mark sand model or some other optimization approach, and also potentially other stakeholder proposals. And then the user could click on different scenarios that weigh the trade-offs in different ways and get new ideas. So for example, at the bottom, they clicked on a more optimal solution, and they see that there's a new that there's an additional wind farm placed in a particular geography. The reason why we love this is often, our philosophy is kind of this bottom-up approach, and mark sand is perceived as a top-down, and this really helps to strike a balance between the two in a really brilliant way of bringing in the optimization as a resource and not as kind of a constraint on the conversation. And often there are planning processes that start with a mark sand run and everybody freaks out. This we would introduce probably a little bit later on, after people have played with a number of ideas and generate a number of runs, and then bring this in, and then it's really helpful information. And so it's a different way of kind of factoring in the planning process, which we think it could be really powerful and really helpful. And overall, I just wanted to leave you all with this thought. As we're thinking about science communication and the role of science in policymaking, our lab, we really come at it from the perspective of you've got to give people the tools to work the problem themselves. It's not good enough to just kind of work out, oh, this is obviously the right answer, and then have your brilliant PowerPoint deck, because people push back. People, they've got their own financial livelihoods on the table, and for them to really understand it and not be completely defensive from the get-go, they've got to get their hands dirty and really kind of work the problem and see where the hard constraints are and see, okay, now I get it. Now I realize that if we have a lot more of X in this location, we'll have to sacrifice Y. And kind of really being able to work that really makes the light bulbs go off for stakeholders. So I'll leave it at that, and we've got some time for questions. There's my email. If you've got any additional questions, feel free to email.